You talk about reliving in cycles. I think so many of us tend to live in the moment, and we tend to think that whatever we're going through now is unprecedented. We've never seen it before, and I think there are aspects of that perhaps right now for sure. But tell us, from the lens of history, um, where we've seen this division before. You've referenced the bicentennial time and what the nation was going through. Have there been moments in our American history where we have felt, or so many of us have felt, this disconnect between what's happening and what the ideals and values are supposed to be?
I think in so many ways our current moment is familiar and wholly unprecedented. And I think what's different about it, Frank, and you can help me in with this, is that the traditional divisions carry in tow a deep suspicion about democratic institutions, a kind of rejection of democracy as such, not a claim of possession of the country to the exclusion of others, but the illiberal tendencies of the country have overwhelmed democratic institutions in our current moment. And that generates a level of crisis that I think we haven't seen before. Uh, but I do believe this, though. This is the echo. In 1876, right after the carnage, this is the first national ritual after the carnage of the Civil War. Reconstruction is collapsing around us. We see the violence in Colfax, Louisiana. We see it in Vicksburg. We see it in Vicksburg, Mississippi, Hamburg, South Carolina. Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898 wasn't the only coup that happened in the South. It was happening all over the South as former Confederates seized power, as the Union was beginning to retreat or release their control over the Southern states, or the states, the traitors, as it were. But at the Philadelphia Exposition, Frederick Douglass was invited to attend. He was invited to sit on the dais with President Grant. A police officer in Philadelphia, he showed him his ticket as he was trying to enter. He said, "There's no way an N-word could be on the dais with the president." And then he was allowed finally to come in, but they wouldn't let him speak. They had to silence Black folk. In 1926, at the 150th anniversary, the Klan, this is usually we talk about the 1920s, Frank, as the Jazz Age, but it's really the decade of the Klan. The Klan was approved initially to hold its annual convention on the grounds of the Philadelphia Exposition. They were going to celebrate the flag and burn a cross at the same time. And, I can go on and on about this, how this double consciousness manifested itself in the ways in which we told or had to tell our story. And it involved in part disappearing the ugliness that make us who we are. Right. Denying the blue note at the heart of the country, as it were.
People who thought that electing our first Black president was somehow going to be not a panacea, but rather a kind of, so many were patting ourselves on our back going, see, we did that. We made that happen. See how good we are. And I can tell you from my law enforcement experience, I was in the FBI when that happened. And I can tell you, or my Secret Service colleagues will tell you the same thing. There was an unprecedented number of threats against the president. It was also the birth of many of the domestic militia groups that we look at, including the Oath Keepers. I'm absolutely convinced that the Oath Keepers came to be because of Barack Obama and their perception that the world was about to end with a Black president. Where do you see us in terms of that? Are we capable of moving forward from the racial division? Over the weekend, I kept seeing the reports of what's going on in Michigan and the governor race and what Trump is saying about El Sayed and the tropes and the memes that are out there and poking hatred at his wife, who wears more traditional garb. Where are we since Barack Obama?
Well, the ugly underbelly of the country is in full view. There is a sense in which, for a while there, the social science data was overstated, saying that America at a certain point would become a majority minority nation. Those demographic shifts, of course, ignited all sorts of anxieties and panic. Barack Obama's election consolidated that panic. You get the Tea Party, you get the Oath Keepers. We saw the rise in white supremacist organizations across. You saw it up close. And this is what's really striking, is that at the time that it was happening, people were saying this was economically driven, that this was a sense that folk were feeling a sense of being left out. They weren't tracking, at least in the public discourse, how deeply racialized, how deeply racist some of this stuff was. And you can see it happening in our current moment, Frank, because the way in which people are responding, say, for example, to DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, and what they're doing is likening it to the Tea Party. The Democrats are experiencing their Tea Party moment. But when they make that move, they only read it in terms of economic alienation. They don't see or read the grievance, the hatreds that really animated the morphing of the Tea Party into MAGA. So they disappear that part and only talk about, right, how these radical fringes are driven by populism, as opposed to the populism of the right being driven by hatreds and the like, and the populism of the left being whatever it is, right? So it's part of this disremembering, right, that allows for this stuff to continue to percolate and overdetermine our politics, because we won't tell ourselves the truth.
Yeah.